Welcome. Welcome everyone here at Michigan State University Detroit Center, and welcome to everyone online. This is the Congressional Town Hall on U.S. Trade Policy. I'm Melanie Foley with Public Citizens Global Trade Watch. Today's event is brought to you by Public Citizen, Communications Workers of America, United Steelworkers District 1, and United Auto Workers Region 1A. We're here in Detroit, which has seen firsthand how corporate-controlled trade deals like NAFTA have hollowed out our communities, outsourced our jobs, harmed workers and the environment here and around the world. And just down the street, there's a meeting of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. And during that meeting, there will also be discussions on the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, or IPEF, a 14-nation trade framework that covers 40% of the global economy. President Biden has repeatedly stated that his administration is pursuing worker-centered trade, and IPEF is an opportunity to shape a new type of trade policy that uplifts workers across borders and tackles climate change head-on. But big tech and other corporate interests are pushing for IPEF to lock in rules that put their profits ahead of jobs, the environment, data privacy, and civil rights. These are some of the issues that we will be tackling today. So without further ado, I am excited to welcome Representative Debbie Dingell of Michigan's 6th, Representative Rashida Tlaib, Representative Rashida Tlaib of Michigan's 12th, and Representative Shri Thanedar of Michigan's 13th, where we are gathered today. Thank you all for being here. We have several local labor and civil society leaders who will ask questions of the members, and then we'll take questions from press and others online at the end. We may not have time for every member to answer every question, but this first one is for all three of you and comes to us from Laura Dickerson, Director of United Auto Workers Region 1A.
Thank you, Laura. It's no secret that Detroit has been pulverized. It's no secret that Detroit has been pulverized by past trade deals that have shipped jobs overseas to corporations. Corporations that take advantage of lower wages. We deal with that here as well. How have each of you seen the impacts of trade policy play out here in your districts? And what are some of the key issues that need to be addressed in current and future trade deals?
Well, welcome to the 13th district. I'm so proud to represent the city of Detroit in United States Congress. And like Melanie started and said about the impact of unfair trade practices, we have seen that here in Detroit, right? Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So we have seen that firsthand. We have issues about corporate profits. We have issues about outsourcing of our jobs to Mexico and other places. Obviously, corporations focus so much on their bottom line. And who loses out is the worker. Who loses out is the worker, the wages, and our living conditions. So we have an unusual opportunity right now. Everybody looks up at United States as the economic power, and we need to negotiate well. We need to leverage our economic power for the benefit of our workers. And as we lift up our workers in terms of wages and in terms of working conditions, we need to lift up workers of all of the world. We can't do this in isolation just in the United States, because then everybody else corporations and that greed is exploiting workers in outside, and that impacts the livelihood of our workers. So we need to, using our leverage as the economic power of the world, we need to negotiate fair deals. We need to negotiate good deals and ensure that there are teeth in those negotiations and in those agreements, so that when a foreign country violates those that agreement, we can go back and hit them economically, hit them where it hurts. And that's what we need to, these agreements need to be fair deals. And I can't say that United States have always, done a fair negotiations. And we haven't negotiated well in the past, and we can't afford to do that now with 40% of the GDP at stake. I have more to say, but I'm going to refer to my esteemed colleagues here.
Thanks, Shri. Thanks, Shri. And first of all, I want to thank all the union partners for being here today, because this is really about working men and women. I want to make that really clear. My regional director, Laura Dixon's here, so she asked the first question. I'm very, she's all of ours, but 1A is my home. But it's also nice to welcome Region 9, to see all of you guys here too, and women. But you guys are all guys. I'm just getting in trouble here. I want to thank all of the labor unions, because they do know what's at stake. And Melanie, I want to thank you for bringing us all together. I think that I'm going to, and the importance of this today is the fact that we are seeing part of these conversations happen in Detroit with the trade ministers here. And I'm probably going to get in trouble, which I do, by saying it's great to see people's presence here, but I'm not interested in words. I'm interested in actions. And it's hollow to bring people to, the Midwest is where we have seen the worst impacts of bad trade deals over the last few decades. When NAFTA passed, and I'm very proud to say the man that I was married to was opposed to NAFTA. And TPP was a bad deal. And I'm going to be very blunt, give a warning to everybody. I'm just going to say to everybody, I warned people Donald Trump would win, because I was in the union halls listening to the workers in 215 and 216, and they were worried about bad trade deals that had shipped their jobs overseas and wanted to know that somebody cared about bringing their jobs home. And that I'm going to say to everybody right now as we begin this conversation. Now, these are different trade negotiations. I have strong feelings about whether they should be coming before Congress or not. It's a framework. We'll see where the reality of all of this takes us in the next few months. But I am going to say to you, first of all, I do believe President Biden has done more for working men and women than any president has done in many decades. And when he makes that a center frame, point and center. But I think the pandemic, we've talked about our supply chains have been shipped overseas, and people didn't understand what had happened until we had a pandemic. And we did not have masks, gowns, or gloves in this country. And when that pandemic happened, I was calling people from the auto companies in China, asking them to go inspect that kind of equipment, because our workers were desperate for PPE, but we didn't even know what the quality was of that. And before people were going to spend a couple $1 million to get PPE equipment, we needed to know if it had any quality. And quite frankly, some of it didn't. But it's now not just an economic security for our workers. It's a national security issue. We are too dependent upon other countries, being blunt, in the Asia-Pacific area. And we got to bring those jobs home. And so any agreement that is negotiated, as far as I'm concerned, we really have to be paying attention. And labor standards matter and environmental standards matter. Labor stand in the I still call it TPP, and then I call it YMCA, but the UMCA. We did put labor standards in there that we have attempted to use a number of times to allow, people don't understand that we are competing in Mexico where they're not allowed to, they have unions, but they aren't allowed to negotiate. They don't have fair wages. And we have seen since the passage of UMCA that we have tried in a number of places to enforce the need to allow those local areas to be able to negotiate. You can't compete when people want to pay cheap wages and they don't pay benefits. We should be raising the standards of all workers every place. And we're looking at the future. We all care about climate change is real. We care about environmental standards, but we shouldn't be competing with other countries that don't have to meet environmental standards that we do. So we need enforceable labor and environmental standards. This may be a framework. I'm going to pay attention to what's negotiated. I trust President Biden. He's a good man. He cares about working men and women. But we got to make sure that everybody that we are dealing with understands what this is about and what really does get discussed.
No, thank you so much, Director Dickerson. Really centering it on our district and what's happening right here in our backyard is so important to expose just how broken these trade deals are. It didn't, and this is the piggyback, I mean, it really didn't center on labor rights at all or climate justice around environmental protections. We're competing with countries that don't have the kind of environmental protections we have. And we know we're not even as far along as we should be even in our own country. And so it's really important. You know, when one union job leaves our districts, I mean, it's because union job is community stabilizer. I really, truly believe that. One leaves, the whole neighborhood is impacted. And so as we move forward, we need to understand some of our past mistakes of folks that were in Congress before and others. It's very clear you're asking us to compete with folks that don't have the same kinds of rights and the same kind of protections for our climate. And so it is clear that, you know, that was a big loophole in what is now us losing leverage right here at home. And it's impacting right in our backyard. We're losing leverage when we have to now compete in this way. And it's not as easy as my district always says, bring them back. We can bring them back and pull back, but the way we can do it is this large investment that we continue to do to subsidize some of this job creation is to put that language in there to require and for it's harder for them to leave. And so that is something that I realize is very, very important. There's also very much a lack of transparency, maybe because I'm new, I don't know, but this stuff is not even published. There's no public input. It's like kind of done in closed doors. That has to change as well.
Not kind of.
I'm trying to be nice, Debbie. So, okay.
Yeah. Thank you all. Our next question comes from Aisha Siddiqui, a local student.
Thank you, Melanie. My question is, President Biden has repeatedly talked about the importance of a new worker-centered model. And the White House advisor Jake Sullivan recently stated that the prevailing assumption was that trade-enabled growth would be inclusive growth, that the gains of trade would end up getting broadly shared within nations. But the fact is that those gains failed to reach a lot of working people. How is IPEF expected to be different from past FTAs?
I would let somebody else start.
I'm going to start.
Yeah, sure.
I think it's really important that there is robust, I don't say like whatever, robust labor standards. But I am very pleased to hear the President of Biden's, you know, commitment to not include what we call the investor state dispute settlement system. That is something that again is very, very important in regards to future trade deals. And I think that is going to be the difference in regard him moving towards making like more worker center deals. I mean, it's very clear that he's committed to doing that. And, you know, as an attorney, I mean, it's kind of forced arbitration, you know, kind of it really doesn't protect us. And again, it removes our power as community and unions and our power to, again, protect that worker. And so at least we got to move that in that direction. I think I'm really pleased and hopefully he'll follow through on that commitment.
I agree with Rashida that I trust President Biden, and he has said he will not sign any trade agreement that does not protect workers. And I believe that that's what he wants to do. And I do know that that's what Joe Biden wants to do because I've talked about this. Rashida's heard me do it when we've had some healthy exchanges. But
I just want to make sure the interpretation's the same of what worker protection is.
But I also want to say that it's really important, and we've got to make a clear distinction between the IPEF and TPP, which is I did too much trade. So for those of you who don't know it, it was the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is what NAFTA, well, anyway, there are a lot of discussions, but, and in politics, if you're explaining, you're losing, but these differences are critical. What Rashida talked about it in broader terms, but IPEF does not extend big pharma patents, which is a major issue. It cannot and must not ever limit Buy America provisions or procurement terms, or have investor tribunals that promote offshoring. These are all significant differences under consideration that are in these new agreement negotiations. As I've said, if we stick to the status quo of previous agreements, we're going to lose the support of hardworking men and women, but I know that that's not what the president wants. And I really do take him at his word, but that's why this matters. It's why everybody here needs to be vocally engaged. You need to get I invite everybody to go into the union halls, not only 1A, but I called Laura after I'd been in one union hall last October and said, you're going to hear about it. It was the worst town hall I've ever had in my life. Not that they were mad at me, but workers are worried and they're expressing their concerns.
And many of them were retirees. I had a similar experience.
And what we want is to make sure that policymakers need to understand what working men and women in the halls on the line, working every day, their fears, their concerns, their worries about the future of their jobs. How do they compete with people that are being paid a quarter of what they're being paid? Make your voices heard.
Again, we need to take our leadership and our economic power to negotiate better deals. Status quo is not a solution. We have a long way to go on keeping our climate, safe and addressing the climate crisis. So we are not even close to that. And talking about status quo would be totally irresponsible. We need to not only set higher standards for ourselves, but ensure that our partners follow those, and that we should take no less than and expect the same standards that we have for our labor, the same standards we have for quality, and same standards we have for environment. And we need to enforce that worldwide. And that's our responsibility as the leader of the free world.
Thank you all for that. And I would just add that some of the terms that you all mentioned that are expected to not be in IPEF, that is the result of our movement, of everyone here.
Absolutely a result of this movement.
And to keep us on track, I'm going to ask our next two question askers to ask one after another, and then the members can respond to both together. So we have up first Dan Vicente with the United Auto Workers, and then Charles Daniels with the Communications Workers of America.
Yo, first off, thanks for the invite. Me and my guys came up from Philly and Buffalo, so we appreciate being here today. Before I ask my question, I just want to say real quick, U.S. workers are not anti-international workers, right? We want people in Asia and across the world to have good paying jobs. We've seen what bad trade agreements do. And if we don't put our foot in and fight for our wages and standards of living here, it'll affect the rest of the world, and it exposes international workers to more risk and pollutes the environment more. So we have to fight for everybody. So we're not anti-workers in Asia. We want them to have good jobs, but not at the expense of U.S. workers.
That's right.
That's really important. And another point to make is that people don't understand what unions have negotiated for them over the years. They have no appreciation that what they take for granted, the 40-hour work week, the healthcare, the benefits, but the clean and safe environment, a safe environment has been negotiated by your union, and you're competing with plants that have no OSHA kind of standards. So
puts them at risk, and we don't want them to get hurt, just like I don't want my guys in Philly to get hurt.
And not only we are not anti-international workers, but we are, I think, because of our adherence to the labor policy and living wages and better working conditions for the U.S. workers, we have raised worldwide standards, and we need to do that. So not only we're not anti-international workers, but because of us, people are going to be able to live and have living wages all across the world. So I see a better future for all of the world and a better future for workers of the world to have better living conditions, better negotiating rights, better wages, and a safer workplace. So I think we are taking that leadership, and we can let that go for benefit of status quo.
So I appreciate that. So just get to my question, and I appreciate y'all. The U.S. is seeing a new wave of labor organizing across the U.S. and subsequently a new wave of union busting. We're also seeing big corporations that routinely outsource jobs to exploit workers abroad using joint ventures and other schemes to sidestep existing union contracts here, all while taking advantage of taxpayer incentives intended to create good union jobs. Do you believe we should ensure in these new trade deals that our international agreements support good union jobs while ensuring the labor rights are respected abroad so we don't encourage a race to the bottom across the whole world?
Yes.
We're gonna do four.
Oh, we're gonna do a bunch of them? Because that one's an easy one.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Great, good call, Dan. Great question, Dan. First, thank you to all three of you. I know that you firmly believe that morality and human rights doesn't end at the shores of America, and that an injury to one is an injury to all. So thank you very much. Much to what Dan just said, we have concerns about some of the member countries of the IPEF that don't have great human rights records, specifically the Philippines, where just a couple weeks ago, Alex De La Rosa was murdered. He was brutally killed, stabbed to death. And he was a prominent labor leader, an LGBTQ activist, and his group worked call center workers. And for years, they had been harassed and threatened. This is a country that's notorious for red tagging its own citizens. And then corporations here use that to exploit those countries for cheap labor and then to leverage that against our workers for lower wages and lower standards. So my question is, should a new trade deal be used to address those practices? And then do you have concerns that a trade deal like this with a country like the Philippines, that they would not adhere to that and those atrocities would continue? Thank you.
Since you wanted to go first.
So Dan, I completely agree. Yes. Look, I think nobody wants to talk about corporate greed, but we need to. We wouldn't have unions and labor if we didn't have to go up against the kind of focus on profit and greed that happens. And so I completely agree. Yes. But and again, it has to be strong and very meaningful. None of this cursory may or a but must kind of thing. When it comes to enforcement, it really matters here, because that's the thing. We can come up with a nice tight deal that prevents what happened to this, amazing activist organizer, and protecting someone that will speak up against that corporate greed and that kind of drive that comes out, and they're hiding behind many folks saying, because, they have suits on, right? They're in a little business. They know, but they're actually criminally acting by, again, targeting, again, those that are trying to, have human dignity in the workplace and fight back against that profit-driven, machine that comes out of some of these multi-billion-dollar corporations. But it has to be enforced. And so I'm hoping anything that comes out of this is obviously transparency and all these kinds of protections and centered on labor rights and climate justice, but it has to be enforced. And the only way you got to do it is we have to have the courage to claw back. We have to have the courage to say, we're not going to subsidize or allow products like this that are based off of death of people to come into our country. I mean, we have to kind of roll up our sleeves and understand who we're dealing with. Any other community seeing this, but because it's a corporation and those that are driven behind it, everybody kind of walks away and doesn't actually understand what they did to this person, and probably many others that were impacted and abused, right? So I think it's really important that anything we do has to be enforced, because we can say yes and everything, but if we're not actually putting some teeth into it and that claws it back or does something again to hold them accountable, I don't think we're going to see anything meaningful.
Yeah, I also feel that we can deal with the governments. We can make these agreements. We can put teeth into the agreement so we can enforce it. But the real power is with the workers. And I think a lot of the achievements that we have in this country benefiting workers is because workers organized, because they got in the streets, because they marched, because they protested, because they organized. And if we can go out, I don't know how we do that. Either we do that through social media or another way. But if we can really communicate directly with the workers of the world, and, so not only we approach it two ways. One is to having a good ironclad agreements that we can enforce. But at the same time, if we can, reach out to the workers of the world and communicate to them the same sense of fairness and fair labor practices, safe working environment, the living wages. If we can bring that concept into the world and communicate that and let them rise, and that would do is it will force those governments and those corporations to address these issues.
So I want to be really clear. We cannot and will not turn a blind eye, period. And it's why we need strong labor standards that are enforceable. So it's why we need a mechanism for civil society to hold people accountable and to have appropriate, be able to actually require how you do hold them accountable. So that's why what's happening right now is so important. And I do believe that the president wants that and is going to focus on that. But I think raising the issue, having people understand. Who understood that our supply chains had gone overseas except the person that lost their job on a line until we saw the pandemic? We have to raise and educate people about what we're fighting for. Because when we sit here, or I say to somebody, we got to have enforceable labor and environmental standards, it's like gobbledygook. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I'm for. We got to make people understand why it matters and what's at stake.
Thank you all. That's such a good segue to our next question, which comes to us from the United Steelworkers. They weren't able to make it, but I'll read it on their behalf. The rapid response mechanism in the USMCA has been used to force employers in several Mexican facilities to allow their workers to negotiate and sign real union contracts. Do you think that this mechanism has been successful? And do you think such a facility-specific rapid enforcement mechanism should be replicated in IPEF and other trade agreements?
Absolutely, yes. And, that should serve as a model to ensure something. So I'm just going to stay short here so that we can have more questions.
Yes, I think we need to be talking about it, but I'm also going to say we got to make sure that we're holding people accountable again. There was in Mexico, it was a GM plant that they allowed a vote to occur, but the people were threatened. Workers were threatened. And so I know I actually want to praise General Motors and our government, who went back and said to the Mexican government, this agreement doesn't mean you can turn a blind eye or let people be threatened. And there was another election. We have to really make sure that we're holding, and we need corporations provide jobs. The corporations need to be part of, when they're in another country, abiding by those trade agreements and holding the union. I mean, Mexico is a very complicated country, as we all know, but General Motors was an important part of holding their people accountable and asking for another election. And we need to hold corporations accountable too. We need to hold everybody accountable.
Yeah, I think worker rights is not complicated though. But I know Debbie agrees completely. Look, enforcement actions have to be timely. They do. The longer they wait, the more workers get hurt and the more we lose leverage too, I think. And then also it has to be targeted actions. And so it's great and successful. We got to remember those are very important integral parts of making sure that it continues to be successful, but timely enforcement is incredibly important in these kinds of negotiations.
We have a couple more questions from folks in the room, but I want to remind those online that you can submit questions via the Zoom Q&A feature. So go ahead and get those in, and we'll get to those questions at the end. Next up, we have Christine McGillivray from the Sierra Club.
Oh, Christine.
Hi there. I'm so glad to be here. And I'm really excited that we were invited to participate because I think far too often labor and environmentalists are pitted against each other, which is ridiculous and it's not accurate. Sierra Club is a union organization and we want to make sure that we protect public health, which means protecting worker health too. So really glad to be here. This is great. So in IPEF, there includes a commitment right now to not weaken or reduce the protections afforded in domestic environmental laws in order to attract trade or investment, and for parties to effectively enforce their respective labor laws. But given the climate emergency that we're facing and the legacy of trade generating a race to the bottom on environmental protections, should we really be settling for commit to not weaken instead of pushing for the strongest possible environmental standards that we all really are collectively accountable for making sure are enforced?
This is not a time for status quo. We got to be dreaming big, and we need to be looking at. We need to have the vision for a clean environment, and we need to communicate that and enforce that and take that leadership.
This is why I'm like a broken record. We need enforceable environmental standards like we need enforceable labor standards. Because if we don't have enforceable standards, it's going to put us behind and it's going to put the world behind. This is an opportunity for all of us to work together to achieve environmental goals around the world. And it's a way to establish a template for climate friendly and climate conscious trade where we can help lift everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm so glad you all are here. You know this. I literally grew up in Southwest Detroit where all of my neighbors were union organizers. And at the same time, we're all getting sick from the lack of accountability, which, I always tell IBEW is the one who installs all the mitigation at one of the locations. And to me, it can be an integral part that our union workers are the ones who can help protect our air and protect our land and really address the climate crisis in a very profound way. For me, I think for so many of us that have been watching this, continue these kind of environmental standards be violated, it's like we wait for it to be reoccurring. And I hope that we can move away from that and understand that this constantly recurring. If they do it once, I promise you it will happen again and again and again. We're seeing it now in the east side of Detroit with Stellantis on their 8th violation. And so, and again, it's because I don't know who they hired to install the mitigation, the equipment, but it didn't get installed correctly. And they're not putting the investment probably to put real folks that know what they're doing to install those mitigations. But it just has to be actionable, and we can't wait for it to be reoccurring environmental violations. That's something that, again, I know our residents, everybody's asking for that to stop.
Our next question comes from Ariana Zwern with Public Citizen.
Hi, thank you all so much for being here. So as I'm sure all of you know already, the US and Japan recently signed a critical minerals agreement, which facilitates trade in the minerals needed to make electric car batteries. But that quickly negotiated deal had no meaningful labor or environmental standards in it, which to me is quite concerning. Are you also concerned about human rights abuses or environmental degradation from the mining and processing of these minerals? And are you at all concerned that these critical mineral agreements, so-called free trade agreements, can be created without any congressional oversight?
Okay, I'm going to make it really clear that from the very when Rashida's laughing because I didn't know that the U.S.-Japan deal had been negotiated. So when she said she was being nice, they're being negotiated behind closed doors. Yeah. And I want to express very serious reservations with this agreement signed with Japan on critical minerals and the precedent that it is setting in both the terms of labor and environmental standards of future agreements, period. And I have a number of concerns about fast tracking trade agreements. Congress has the sole authority to regulate commerce with foreign nations. And that's why I think we have a very serious oversight role to play. We have to reassert our constitutional role in approving trade authority, and we must vote on any trade deal that is involved with these countries. That's not a framework. That's negotiating it. And we shouldn't be negotiating any critical mineral agreements. I sat with labor. Labor here knows it, and the environmentalist knows it. We know where we've got to go. Electric vehicles are the vehicles of the future, but we can't be more dependent on Asia. We got to bring our dependency home. We need to be focused on developing those mineral supplies here. And we got to, build the pathway and build our domestic capacity to be able to mine and process critical minerals. While in this country, you're going to have to respect landmark environmental laws at the same time. We know we are way too dependent upon China at the moment. We want to bring that here. And we need to ensure that our trade agreements are handled in a manner that doesn't help China more. And there's a lot of chicanery going on, the way that things are being bought into this country. The other thing I'm really concerned about, I mean, we've got to look, as we're talking about electric vehicles, we've got to make them affordable. That is a reality. Joe Manchin was right, saying we were too dependent upon China. He put into the IRA bill, not my favorite name, which I always say to as well when I'm with these two, but that we had to, that if we're going to give a tax credit to someone, it's got to be made in America by American workers. And he's right about that. So we need to be support. I don't want chicanery. I want our American workers building these vehicles. I want those tax credits to be given here so that people can afford them more. And that's where I think our focus needs to be. So I don't want anything here to be done that it could be construed in a way that it's not, oh, well, this is American made because I'm going to get in trouble. I already know I'm in trouble.
Tell the truth.
I am, I do. That it'll be mined someplace in a dip, they'll switch names around it and try to make it so it appears it was mined here in the US and made by a US worker. That's not what this is about. I want us to build these vehicles here. I want our workers to be paid a fair and decent wage. I want to get rid of the two-tier system. And I want us to build our capacity here to mine and develop new innovation and technology. China's ahead of us. We shouldn't admit it, but we got to invest here. Our government should be helping. Their government puts all their money into it and then steals our intellectual property. We need to be the United States of America put the world on wheels. I want us to stay at the forefront of innovation and technology. I want us to be building those vehicles here with good American jobs, good American minerals, and I want them to be affordable to all Americans. Well, that's why we're playing some games. So I'm not playing games. Excuse me. I want to make sure that we're given, quite frankly, Joe, it's the way the Treasury interpreted it. So what we want and what the purpose of that law is to have it made in America by American workers.
Excuse me, Congresswoman Tlaib, would you like
No,
to go
thank you so much. I mean, look, I think it's really incredibly wrong that trade agreements are being done without any congressional oversight, import or consultation. That's exactly what happened here. It is really sad to see that the agreement says so-called states, their intent to uphold labor standards. What the heck does that mean, enforcement wise? And so I really think it's completely unacceptable. I'm always for strong binding language so that, again, we have that leverage, because it seems like we're allowing the loophole to exist. We know exactly what they're going to do. They show us over and over again exactly how they get out of protecting the worker and out of protecting environmental, frontline communities and environmental justice. In this case, allowing us to sit there and have a sacrifice, like these communities are going to be sacrifice zones, y'all. And I don't want to have our country play any part of that. I think we can do better. And I mean, we have a pathway to do better. By the way, I've been telling everybody to get rid of those tier systems for a while, but that's just because I heard from so many of my neighbors who
We hear about
been
it
there
from our
7-9
workers.
years with saying the same. I'm just letting you know, I was like, this is so wrong, but I'm with you all on that.
Yes. Now,
She absolutely is.
Yeah.
well, we can't have trade agreements where labor is not at the table. We can't have trade agreements where environment is not at the table. And we can't have trade agreements that are not approved by the Congress. As simple as that. And, again, I'm going to be short so that we can keep getting more questions.
Thank you. Next up, we have Hillary Hayden with the Trade Justice Education Fund.
Hi, thank you all so much for being here and for taking our questions. Tech companies like Amazon continue to reach into more areas of our lives than we can keep up with, absorbing businesses in our healthcare industry, permeating our education system, union busting, and mapping and listening to us in our homes through devices like Alexa. Big tech companies have fabricated the idea of digital trade and used their privileged access to negotiations to try to shape new trade deals, especially IPEF. How can our right to privacy and the rights of people around the world be protected from unregulated tech abuse? Thank you.
I mean, I just want you guys to know that we were told by, we get briefed by any kind of security issues. So sometimes our government can see them trying to target us based on what committees we're on. I mean, serious, pretty serious. They told us, do not have Alexis in your home. Do not have any of these smart devices in your home. If we're telling members of Congress to be cautious, I mean, what are they doing to the American people? So I completely agree. We need to be very, very worried and at the forefront. So I really appreciate that question. I think it's important. But again, members of Congress are being briefed and told not to have these devices in their home. That alone signals that, our neighbors and American people are exposed.
Look, we've already, you've heard in the last week that, okay, now I'm sitting here trying to tell how mad I'm making my staff every 5 minutes, but I'm me. Rashida knows I'm me. First of all, I have expressed, I totally trust President Biden. So this is not anti-Biden administration, but I want him to come into my halls. I want him to come into my worker halls and hear what people are saying. So, pillar one of this whole thing has been focused on tech, in the coast, not the heartland. And I'm like, come to the heartland and let's make sure that those issues are also being discussed as we're doing that, which I kind of addressed in critical minerals, et cetera, a minute ago. But this week, you've even seen some of the smaller tech companies express their concern about how the bigger tech companies are dominating these talks. And they're really worried that anti-competitiveness is going to be built into the framework of these agreements. And we have to make sure that that doesn't happen. The digital agreement, and by the way, we also need privacy legislation. We need it in this country and we need it in the world. These corporations are, I haven't decided what I want to do with TikTok yet, because I think it's very hard to ban one company. But we need to understand that China is collecting data on us. And we need to understand across all platforms, data is being collected. And we have no idea how that data is being collected or used and in what manner. And these young kids today, young kids, you don't care about privacy, but you need to know they're tracking where you go. They're tracking your health records. They're tracking what you say to people. You have no privacy, none that is going to be used in God knows what way now and 30 years from now. We need strong privacy legislation in this country and across the world. So am I worried about what's being negotiated in this? Yes. And it needs to be worker focused, individual focused, and we need to make sure we are not setting any dangerous precedents.
Well, privacy is an issue and it's going to be an issue. But look at a broader picture now. We're seeing corporations like Amazon, like Google, and larger corporations. These are becoming so much of a monopolies. There is so much wealth is getting, concentrated into big corporations and the billionaires. I sit on the small business committee, and I'm trying to get access to funding and capital for small mama papa shops, small businesses. We need to lift people at the bottom up, because this gap between the rich and the powerful corporations and general people, this is widening. And the only way for us to address that is to promote entrepreneurship, help our small businesses, and provide them the resources, because they create most of the jobs. And if we can help the small businesses, grow and provide the necessary means that they need, the capital that they need, we can close this gap. And we don't have this then mega powerful corporations and their greed that is infringing on our privacy.
Thank you. So we will turn now to some questions from the Zoom. We have one from Stephen Overly at Politico. He says, the Biden administration is not negotiating IPEF under Trade Promotion Authority, aka Fast Track, and does not plan to submit IPEF to Congress for formal approval. Do you support the Biden administration taking this approach? And does Congress have the capacity to shape this agreement given this approach? What recourse, if any, will members of Congress have if you do not support the final version of IPEF?
Okay, so I want to see where this all goes. And by the way, what I'm saying in this room is what I say to the administration every single day. Anybody who knows me that knows I'm not a bullshitter, I talk straight wherever I am. The trade part of the IPEF is not simple. It is 10 chapters, hundreds of pages, and it has binding provisions with 14 countries that cover more than 40% of the world economy. Just take that in. That's why I'm watching. We're going to see, they say it's a framework. I'm going to count how many binding provisions are in there and how it's going to affect my audit workers every day.
I mean, one of the things that is very daunting. I mean, is again, maybe because I'm new, I keep saying this, but the lack of transparency and engagement of Congress is really problematic. I mean, we're the ones that workers and folks are coming to, and there's no engagement directly to us. They come up with this deal and then they throw it at us and force us, or not enforce. I mean, they're not going to force me to do anything, but push us to, bend and wheel around things that, again, we didn't get a say in or input on. And so the lack of transparency with these trade agreements, I think, is really problematic. Not only trade, I mean, it's really problematic for our nation.
Certainly, the administration cannot do this independent of Congress. It is Congress's responsibility to and be involved in all trade agreements.
I want to say this because I'm obviously concerned, but I got to tell, I actually said this to Rashida and I talked, we're known as double trouble. Sorry, Shri, but you don't want to be part of triple trouble. I said to her, when I tried to raise this as an issue when we were doing the TPP and the USMCA, people rolled their eyes. They didn't believe what I was telling them. I kept trying to tell them, you need to come to Michigan. You need to hear how the workers are worried. Rashida was on the plane when I talked to the president. He hears me. He really knows that this is an issue. And I do believe that he is really not going to sign something that hurts the workers. But I think it's why it's so important that we raise our concerns. We say what the issues are and, and I haven't exactly been quiet with any cabinet member about, we need to make sure we're listening to what the workers are saying, and we need to make sure we know what's in these trade agreements. And I'm like, you see the three of us doing it, but we've got a trade working group that we've been meeting regularly. We've been expressing our concerns. The Senate, they may not get a lot done, but the Senate knows how to, I shouldn't be taking my cheap shot, but there's some very effective senators that are raising their voices and just asking questions. And, that's what you do. People like us have a responsibility to ask the question. So we do try to get more transparency.
Thank you. Next up, we have a question from Joe Kirshner at the Solidarity Center. It's hard to know because we can't see the text, but he says, We understand that IPEF will allow companies to enforce their quote unquote rights, whereas labor and environmental organizations will only be able to request. What can you do in Congress to ensure that labor and environmental rights within IPEF can be enforced with the same effectiveness as with the USMCA rapid response mechanism?
I think we've addressed that. We need to, again, labor has to be a part of it, and Congress has a responsibility to ensure that, environment and labor is an inherent part of these agreements. And I think we just need to keep that pressure up on the administration to make sure that we are a partner in these negotiations and any resolution that happens.
I mean, it doesn't seem fair or balanced. It has to be binding. How is the worker going to protect themselves, or unions are going to protect themselves if they don't have a right to the same kind of accountability? So I just, again, that is something that I don't know you can negotiate away. You're literally giving them the right to go ahead and violate certain standards when you don't give them a pathway for accountability.
This is where Congress has a responsibility to push for accountability in any trade agreement that's being negotiated. And the beginning of your question was accurate. We don't know what's in there, so we don't know that what you said is accurate, but we need to have a full accounting in the Congress about what is being done and hold them and build, by the way, on the USMCA gains. That needs to be what we build from.
I know you all have other engagements to get to, but we have just one more question. And this is from the Progressive Democrats of America. Given the secrecy of negotiations and the outsized role that industry has had in shaping the early discussions of IPEF,
tech industry. I just had to get that shot in.
So yeah, you can see the recent report from Senator Warren's office on the tech industry access. What role can civil society play that has a real impact in the outcome? What can folks watching do to support efforts to prevent future trade deals from causing the kinds of damage that NAFTA and the WTO caused here in Detroit and around the world?
Well, we need to rise, we need to protest, and we need to organize and not accept this, whether it's from the Democratic administration or from the Republican administration. We just need to stand up.
I was just going to say, disrupt business as usual, people. We've already learned our lesson. We trusted all this other language and these word games that they play. We cannot continue to do it. We learned our lesson. It's like if anybody tries to say, let's do it, but we already did and it didn't work. So we have examples of showing over agreement. It didn't work to do it that way. It didn't work to not give the legal binding agreement, putting the legally binding agreement in there to protect the workers. It didn't work to allow it to recurring client. It doesn't work. And so we got to disrupt the business as usual and show again that we historically did it the way those folks are going to come back probably and show us, and it didn't work. And so again, we have to push and demand more. I can tell you many of your members, this is the time for you to engage, but many members will not be even talking about this or thinking about this like we do all the time because of where we're at. I mean, we're literally in the headquarters of I grew up in a neighborhood where for us to build one car, 7 trucks had to come through my neighborhood off the Ambassador Bridge. And so I've seen the impact and it's been our daily lives, but many members are going to wait until that deal comes before them and have no idea that these are issues that you all care about.
This is a very complicated deal. And everybody's talking about, not everybody, because most people don't even know that this is happening. And where there's not happening and the trade ministers weren't here this week, we wouldn't be gathered here. But those people that do follow it are focused on the technology, the Googles and the Amazons and aren't, which is why I have said to people, okay, who's watching out for the heartland? Who's watching out for manufacturing? And by the way, their workers they're not organized the way that the people in this room are, so that the auto workers or the steel workers or the communication workers are organized. So they don't even have people that are talking to them or telling them about what is happening. I would tell everybody, first of all, if you're a union member watching this today, you need to invite your member to come to a union hall, get them in there and and I don't want it to be, I love you all. I love my regional director. She's a very important part of my life, but she never, ever, ever tries to keep me from talking to all the members at 1A. I'm in there regularly. I hated COVID and Rashida's in there because we want to know what members are saying, but we try to go into every one of our locals. I hated giving her my favorite local was local 600.
It's because it's right there always on my way. I'm going to stop by.
But I always lived there too, and but we're in our union halls. I said to my staff again, I want to be in every, now that members weren't meeting in the UAW was, that one last October, but a lot of the members weren't meeting, but now they're back in those halls. Invite your member of Congress to come in and ask them questions and ask them to express their concerns. So start there. And we need to find a way to communicate with workers on the coasts and in the tech industry that they really care about what's happening and that their future is being impacted by this, and find a way to engage them and get them engaged. Hold town hall meetings, have the Sierra clubs here, the environmentalist groups are here. They care deeply about the environmental standards. We need to, everybody needs to use their grassroots power to organize and educate, and then make your voices heard. I think there's nothing, but I am not afraid of doing town halls. I did 5 town halls in one weekend and told both of them I would never do that again, but only because it's, but I want a town hall every week because I want to know what people are saying, or I want to be in a union hall. And I'm begging you all, make sure your members are hearing from you. Get them into a hall where there are a lot of opinions and have them listen and make your opinion, make your voices heard.
Thank you all so much. And it sounds like we're all hopeful. We are watching and we're going to keep fighting. So thank you all members so much. And thank you all to those who are here and those online. Thanks so much.